So look, no doubt you are desperate to leave your day job. Now, I understand exactly how that feels because, look, I'm going to be honest with you. The day that I left my day job, this was one of the greatest days of my life. It genuinely was. You know, when my daughter was born, my daughter was born 11 years ago, right? That was a pretty good day, yeah? You know, however, leaving my day job is not far off. And the reason why I say that is because of this. Just like you and lots of people, I always dreamed about having freedom. You know, making lots of money is fantastic. However, what's more important, what is absolutely priceless, is being able to do what you want, live life on your terms without being dictated to. You know, I remember in my office where I used to work for a very large housing association based in London. And I used to absolutely hate the office politics, right? Every so often, you get a little tap on the shoulder. You know, Jay, can we have a word, please? Yeah, can we have a word? It's like, a word about what? Yeah. Well, such and such said that you did this. You know, I was always management, right? You know, in the customer services department. So it's like, well, Jay, we've heard that, such and such has made a complaint because you said this or you said that. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? I didn't say shit. What are you talking about? You know, little things like that. You know, holiday request. Oh, can I go on holiday? Well, the thing is, Jay, I don't know. You got to get in there early, Jay. You got to get in there early because if you don't get in early, you know, this person's off and that person's off and that person's off. And it's just like, well, hang on a minute. This is my life, and I've got one experience of being who I am, and guess what? The way that I felt was that the day job was, preventing me from really expressing who I really am, really being, who I really want to be. In the corporate world, you can't sit down and just do these videos and just do what you want to do. I mean, look, I work for myself. I can do what I want. However, in the corporate world, you've got to dress a certain way, you've got to look a certain way, you can't really be too out there because, hang on a minute, that goes against policy and all this type of stuff. So that was my experience, and that's why I really wanted to leave it, okay? It did take a while, from when I first made a real clear decision to leave the day job, it did take me a while. And the reason why is because, I didn't have the mentor, I didn't have the right people around me. I was trying to cut corners. I was trying to just, make money the fast way. I was seeing all these things online saying, all you got to do is just do this, press this button and this is going to happen. And, I'm thinking, yeah, all right, yeah. All I've got to do is just join this thing and press the button and I'm going to be making all of this money. However, guess what? Lo and behold, none of that worked. Of course. Look, if you're watching this video, you might have tried some of these get rich quick, press a button, in the next 10 minutes, don't do nothing, you'll make all this money. You probably experience and understand exactly what it is that I'm talking about. None of it's really real. What is real is you really developing into the entrepreneur. And this is exactly what it is that I had to do. So by getting mentors, surrounding myself with the right people, I then started learning detail, how to structure an offer. How to structure a really good business plan, how to do marketing, how to do sales, how to do it all. But I learned that by surrounding myself with the right people. So many of us, and if you're watching this, no doubt, you may well be in this situation. So many of us are trying to make it. You want to get all the way to the top. You want to be making a multiple 6, if not 7-figure income. You want to get all the way there. And you're going to try and do it all on your own, without any assistance, without any direction, without any mentors, without anything. You might watch a couple of videos on YouTube and think that's all you need. However, if you've tried that and if it's not working, try something else. Yeah, because if you try something else, that might be what it is that you really need in order for you to really get to where it is that you want to be. All right. Now, the thing is that, when I left my day job, it was on the 11th of January, 2013, right? I remember the day clear as day. I walked out of that office. Everybody was saying to me, Jay, you're so lucky. You're so lucky. It's like, well, what do you mean luck? 6 months ago, when I had mentioned that I was paying to have a mentor, you was all saying that I'm getting ripped off. You was all saying that I'm an idiot. You were saying that, look, oh, Shirley, guess what? This idiot, guess how much money he's spending on mentorship? He thinks he's actually going to become successful. So they'd all laugh at me, yeah? And I'm like, cool, you laugh away. I know what I'm about. I know my determination. I know my desire to succeed. I know it all. So you guys you can do what you want, yeah? And that's exactly how I felt. And then 6 months later, When I'm leaving the day job, oh, Jay, oh, you're so lucky, Jay. Oh, I wish I was in your situation. Jay, how do you do it, Jay? How do you do it? I'm like, well, look, I told you, I've been talking about it for the last 6 months. You're the one that chose not to listen to some of the things of what I was saying and, laughing at me instead. And that's what the majority of people are going to do. The majority of people out there, they're not going to understand your vision. They're not going to understand your desire or where you want to go. And the reason why is because they don't share the same desire, because their level of ambition, resides in what they think they are capable of achieving. So they might believe that they're capable of getting a promotion. They can get the next level up. All right, great. But what about, anything beyond that? What about, going for, director status or, a business owner or something like that? It's like, and that's where people sit in a lot of occasions. So, me now saying that I wanted to be this entrepreneur and go on to create a great, income and have financial freedom and time freedom and all that sort of stuff. This is going way beyond people's heads, way beyond their heads. They can't really get there with that type of, talk. You've got to be joking. They can't get there because their mind is too small. And that's not a criticism. It really isn't. The world needs different types of people, and they are not going to maybe see a video like this because they're not going to be seeking out stuff like this. They're going to be watching Love Island. I'm not saying anything wrong with that, okay? On occasions in the past, I've watched a couple of episodes of Love Island, right? Not very many. Or what's the other one? It's over here in the UK. The one on, what's it? Married at First Sight. There you go. They're watching stuff like that, which is fine. It's entertainment. You do what you want. Whereas you're watching videos like this, and no doubt there's going to be other videos of what it is that you may watch that are similar to this type of content. And the reason why you're watching this instead of them is because you're the one that's got the desire. Just like me, I've always had that desire. So, I would make sure that I'm educating myself as much as I possibly can when it comes down to achieving financial and time success. People around you are not going to understand. People in the workplace, they're not going to get it. So that day when I walked out the office and I could smell that fresh air, I walked out, I'm like, and it felt good. It felt fantastic. I walked out, I didn't have any leave and drink, I didn't have nothing. I'm like, listen, I'm gone. I don't need no leave and drink. I don't need none of that. You know what? I'm out of here. And that was it. And I have never looked back. And that was, over 10 years, over 12 years ago now, and ever since then, I've just been doing my own thing online, typically from affiliate marketing to digital marketing agencies to online courses to membership websites to e-commerce, dabbling with a lot of different online type models. But again, where did I learn this stuff? It wasn't just me, just know this information. I learned it from obviously other people in this game. Mentors and stuff like that is always very, very, very useful. It's very, very, very important. Because when you do transition from employment to entrepreneurship, it is a whole different mindset. And, this is really important that we understand how different it is. Because no longer do you have a boss. No longer do you have, somebody telling you that, well, you know what, you got to be here at 8 o'clock in the morning or 9 o'clock in the morning. Where you at? Hang on a minute. Where's Jay? It's 9:05. Where is he? Where is he? You don't have that, so that then means you wake up whenever it is that you want to wake up. So that then means that you don't have, there's no accountability. When you're in a day job, you have to be there at 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock or whatever it is, whatever time you start. You have to get your deadlines done. I remember when I used to work for a company called the Royal Bank of Scotland, if I did not get my deadlines done, by the end of the month, then you get a verbal warning. Yeah. And this is, no matter what's happened throughout the month, you could have had some difficulties or whatever it may well be. If you do not hit the deadlines, if you don't hit the tasks, you get your first verbal warning. That is then followed by, if you do it again, if you miss it, the deadline again, you then get, a written warning. Yeah. Then if you do it again, whatever circumstances might have happened, whatever, you then get your final written warning. If you then do it again, then you're out. Now, you don't have that type of, accountability or pressure on your head when you are doing your own business, Not in the same way. Don't get me wrong, there's pressure, but not in the same way. That is, okay, you got to do as per what it is that we are telling you to do. But when you're your own boss, well, you're now just left to your own devices. So what time of day do you start work? I don't really know. Whatever time you really want to start. What time do you finish? Whenever you choose to finish. What time are you having lunch? Lunch? I mean lunch. Like nowadays, obviously, I've been doing this for such a long time. Friggin' lunch break. I'm going to have a break. I need a break. A freaking break. That's not even a part of my world about friggin' lunch break. You just work. If I decide to go and get something to eat, I decide to go and get something to eat. It's not a lunch break. When you're in the day job, it's 1 o'clock. I started work at 9 o'clock today, and hang on a minute, at 1 o'clock, I want my lunch. Don't be disturbing me. Don't ask me to do anything. Don't ask me to take any calls because I'm on lunch. Later on in the day, I'm on break. Sorry, don't come and talk to me. I'm on break. You don't do that. You don't have that same structure when you've got your own business. It's just all on you. It's all on what you choose to do or when you choose to do it. So to get into those routines is not always easy. I mean, even in the early days, for me, it was like, oh yeah, but what time should I start work? Oh, don't know. Successful people, they say they start at like 5 a.m. in the morning, but, I don't really want to start at 5 a.m. in the morning because, it's not really me and blah, 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 blah. And all this type of stuff that used to go through my head. Later I found it better to not have so much, stipulation structure. So that now means that, I will start pretty much, I like to go to the gym in the morning. I like to do a few things. So I might not start work until 11 o'clock. However, I might work sometimes until 10, 11, even midnight on occasion, depends on what I've got on. But again, like deciding that, can take a bit of time. Because again, we're influenced by what we see online and what other people are doing. And it's like, well, hang on a minute. Richard Branson says that he does this, so I better do the same thing and blah, 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 and all the rest of it. So like I say, we've got to now start getting used to, working for yourself with no boss. So that then also means that the action of what we take, sometimes we can procrastinate or we can put things off or we just don't do it. Why? Because we have no one telling us that we have to do it. Look, this is where we've got to become a lot more disciplined. As an entrepreneur, that discipline is so important. Because if this is now what you're using that's going to shape your life for the rest of your life, then you've got to, implement some really strong habits that are conductive towards achieving the right type of success of what it is that you really want to be achieving. Yeah? So that then means that, look, procrastination or not getting stuff done for whatever reason, that's you not feeding your business. The way I see it is like this. My business is like my baby. Yeah, I've got a daughter. She's beautiful, right? She's 11 years old now, right? And there is never a situation, no matter how I feel, because sometimes I hear this, yeah, but Jay, I know I'm doing my own business, but I weren't feeling very well. You weren't feeling, unless you're friggin', on your deathbed, unless you're in a friggin' hospital, yeah, like, get some shit done, yeah, like, oh, but the thing is, Jay, I'm going on holiday, yeah, it's like, you're going on holiday, yeah, all right, great. So what does that mean? Oh, so I'm going to take some time out. Look, take your computer with you and do what's required. Especially in the early days, we are no longer employees. We are entrepreneurs. So that then means that the same rules don't apply. Your annual leave, okay, right now I'm going to leave today. I'm now going to go on holiday. I've booked in some annual leave, with the employment. And now when I'm off on holiday, no one bother me. Look, you're an entrepreneur. It don't work like that. It doesn't. Remember, you have to be driven. The way I treat this, as I was just about to say, this is like my baby. Your business now needs to become like your baby. Just like my daughter, there is never an occasion where I'm not going to feed my daughter, of which I could be on holiday. I could be ill. I could be, just not feeling very productive. No matter what, I'm always going to feed my daughter, right? So just like business, your baby, your business, it feeds on money and you got to feed it. So, what do you mean you're going on holiday? So what, you're going to leave your child just with no food for the next week or two? I actually tried last year. I mean, obviously, I've been doing this now full time for over a decade, okay? So I tried last year. I went on holiday and I said, you know what? I'm going to take my computer, yeah, because I can't not take my computer with me. I can't. I mean, you never know, in my mind, it's like, well, what if I get stranded there? There could be some sort of natural disaster. I can't go nowhere. If I've got my computer, I can feed my baby. Yeah, of course. But I made a decision that, you know what, when I go on this holiday, I'm going to try and not do nothing at all. I'm going to try and do nothing whatsoever. Guess what? I was freaking miserable. And the reason why I was miserable is because each day I'm waking up and I'm thinking to myself, my baby needs feeding. My baby needs feeding. Well, okay, all right, even if I just check my email every day or just do an hour of work. I'm not saying I want to work 12 hours every single day. However, look, I want to just check maybe the email and the fact that I was choosing not to do that, it made me miserable. Because my baby needs feeding, my baby needs looking after. I would never treat my daughter like that. I'd never never not look after her. So, why am I treating my business like as if, it's not there to be looked after? I hated it. I didn't like it. And I come back and I made a decision. I'm never doing that again. I don't give a damn. I'm not saying I want to work, 12 hours a day. I will work an hour a day when I'm on holiday, any holiday, at least an hour a day, because it just makes me feel better. I feel a lot more relaxed, knowing that my baby is, ticking over very, very, very nicely, that sort of thing. Whereas again, that employee mindset, sometimes we struggle to get into that level of understanding of the commitment that is going to be required to really, really make this happen. The commitment, and we're still talking about holidays and, oh yeah, but the thing is, Jay, and this and that and this and that. Look, we're not going to make where it is. We're not going to get there. We're not going to make it. We're not going to make to the levels of where you've got ambition, because you've got to show a lot more commitment than that. So again, employee versus entrepreneur. And the thing is that a lot of employees, they don't want that level of responsibility. Like as an entrepreneur, when do you switch off from work? When do I switch off? Like, well, you don't really switch off. It's like, well, what do you mean switch off? It's a part of me. It's a part of our lives. It's a part of who we are. Talking about switching off. Switching off and doing what? Watching TV. I'm not saying I'm never going to watch the TV. I like Arsenal, yeah? I like Arsenal Football Club, right? So those of you that like football, if you're a Tottenham fan, you might want to switch this this video off right now, yeah? But I like Arsenal, yeah? So guess what? Majority of Saturdays or Sundays when they're playing, I'm watching it on TV. I like a bit of UFC. I like martial arts. So it's not like I don't have downtime, I suppose, if you call it that. It's not like I don't have downtime, but the business is just a part of who I am. It's just like my daughter, she's a part of who I am. Just like other things going on in my personal life, it's a part of who I am. Eating some food later, it's a part of who I am, a part of what I do to live and feel good, for example. So your business is a part of who you are, rather than this is just something that I do and, it's just, well, you know what, and again, employees don't always want to take that level of responsibility because it is a big responsibility. Don't get me wrong, it's not just, it is a big responsibility, so that then means that I'm responsible for lots of people. I've got lots of students all around the world, so I'm responsible for maintaining a level of coaching standards and all this type of stuff. So yes, there is responsibility, but with that responsibility comes great rewards, because those rewards are you being able to do what you want when you want. Those rewards are being able to generate a lot more money. Like once you now transition, you will recognize that earning the amount of money that you earn, let's just say, for example, those people here in the UK, typically what, £2,000, £3,000, £4,000 a month, around the £3,000 a mark, maybe just a little bit under, is what majority of people will take home. So that then means that you're going to work, say, 40 hours a week, 4, 8, 12, 16, 160 hours a month. Let's add in a little bit of commuting, yeah? Let's add in like, 20 hours of commuting, for example, yeah? Because, in the month, right? To and from work, yeah? So that's like 180 hours. You are investing 180 hours to make 3 grand or just under £3,000 a month. As a part of you transitioning to the entrepreneurship, you will realize that 180 hours to make 3 grand, you've got to be joking. Because you can do that in a day, not even that difficult. It's not even going to be that difficult. You could do that in a day. You could easily do that in a week. Easily. You could do that on a webinar. There'll be sometimes that we'll do that on a webinar like that. You can make 10 grand on a webinar. You can make 16 grand on a webinar, for example. These are the sort of figures of what it is that you can produce when you are now taking responsibility at that level to run a business. Yeah? This is why your employers, so the people that you might work for, if you work for a private company, the people at the top of the chain, they understand that you are going to work for pretty much peanuts, whilst they make all of the money, of course. That's why they are the ones that are sitting, on a golf course somewhere or, in the Caribbean somewhere or, doing whatever it is that they want to do, on a yacht somewhere, drinking pina colada, whatever it is, yeah, whatever it is. But they get it. They understand it. They understand it in a huge way that, hang on a minute, I can get away with paying someone. They're going to contribute towards making me maybe, 10, that each person, 10 grand a month, it could, whatever it is. And I can get away with just paying them like a snippet. And they're going to give me all their time for that. All right, fine. You don't have to tell me twice. I'll do it. Because entrepreneurs, we get paid based on our results. We're not thinking about getting paid based on our time. Again, a mindset shift. Entrepreneur, or employee, should I say, to entrepreneur. We're not working based on time. Why would I want to work based on my time? Why would I want to do that? To earn what? So say, for example, you're going to give me an hourly rate. Even if you was going to give me a high hourly rate, let's just say £200 an hour, right? Let's just say £200 an hour. Maybe a solicitor, will earn about £200 an hour, for example. You do a 10-hour day. You've made 2 grand. So, all right, that's not too bad. You've done a 10-hour day. You've made £2,000. That's not too bad. I could do that on a webinar in an hour and a half and make more than £2,000. In an hour and a half, I can make one sale, and that will make me more than 2.5 grand, in that one day. Make one sale. So I could spend an hour making one sale, and you've just made, the same amount of what a high class, solicitor that has been to university and all the rest of it, and you've made the same amount by making one sale. That's the difference. The results are so much, so much more rewarding. But yes, we do need to build ourselves up until we get to that point. I don't want to paint a picture that, all of a sudden, leave your day job, you just make one sale and that's it. You've got to become good at sales, right? Yes, you can make a lot of money on a webinar, but you've got to become good at these webinars, okay? So that is a big part of, again, this whole transition is upskilling yourself in different areas. Some of us might think, okay, well, we might not have to, some of us might just think, yeah, well, hang on a minute, I've got a business, I'm going to sell these phones, right? Or I'm going to sell these pens, I'm going to sell this, and this is it. Well, as an entrepreneur, you're going to wear multiple different hats, certainly in the early days. So that then means that you might be the person that is, doing the service delivery. Okay, so, you might be the person that might have to, coach people or whatever it may well be. Yeah. Then you might also have to be the salesperson. You might then also have to be the marketeer, the marketing person, especially if you haven't got a big budget to get started with. You might also have to be your own accountant and bookkeeper. You might also have to be, your own, whatever. You wear multiple hats. So that then means that we need to learn how to wear these different hats. Again, some people don't want to do that. We think that, I want to do my passion, Jay. I want to do my passion. Yeah. Like, that's what I want to do, Jay. Yeah. I want to make money in my passion. All right. Well, what's your passion? You know, I like to ride horses, Jay. Yeah, I like to ride horses. That's my passion. I want to make money. I want to do that. Now, they're thinking that they can ride horses and make money. Now, I'm not saying that there's nobody out there in this world that is just riding a horse and getting paid just for that. However, you're running a business. Okay, well, you know, we now need to learn some skills about how to sell the horse service of whatever it is that we're providing. You know, we now need to do some marketing. You know, we're going to need a website. Again, we're going to need an accountant. You know, then we're going to need, you know, again, our different hats. You know, what about when a complaint comes through because they're not happy with the service? Yeah, you've got to be able to deal with that. So, yeah, you might have a passion for horses and you're thinking that, well, you know, what can I do that I just spend my day riding horses all day and then that's it. And, you know, and that's it. And I'm making a 6-7 figure income out of just doing that. Well, look, I don't know who does stuff like that. You know, yes, you can make a very good income, but remember, you've got to wear multiple different hats, you know, and you've got to be prepared to upskill yourself, you know, into different areas so that you can now deliver effectively, you know, the business of what it is that you're doing. Entrepreneur, or shall I say employee mindset compared to the entrepreneur mindset, completely different. You know, we grow up. You know, we go to school, we go to university. We realize that if we fail our exams, then we don't get into the university. If we then don't pass the degree at university, we then don't go and get that job as an accountant or the job as, you know, whatever it may well be. Yeah. So that means that we're conditioned that failure is bad. Entrepreneurship, sorry, you got to flip that on its head. It's the complete opposite. Failure is good. But we don't like the idea of that sometimes because we're so conditioned. We are so conditioned that failure is bad. You know, we then might even have a fear of failure when we go into our business, thinking, "Oh shit, but it's going to be really bad. Like, it's going to be really bad. What if I fail? What if I fail?" You know what? The way I say it is like, "Well, look, good. Get out there, get going as soon as you possibly can. You know, get your business to a certain point, 80%. Right now, go." So that you can make lots of mistakes and then you fail and you fail forward. Every single time that you are having a failure, you know, you are growing, you are learning. And then before you know it, you know, you've learned now all of the things of what it is you need to learn, of which now you can now start, you know, celebrating the successes as a result of all of the failures and the growth that has gone on within those failures. All right. So, keep these things in mind because, yeah, you want to leave your day job. You like the idea of leaving your day job. Sounds all great, yeah? Yeah, it is good. Yeah, it's fantastic. All of this stuff is brilliant, yeah? However, remember there's elements of you that must change. You cannot remain the exact same person, be the employee, you know, in the office, you know, and then take that same mindset and try and transition that into your own business where you're having a morning break and a lunch break and an afternoon break. And then, you know, we're leaving at 5 o'clock and we go on holiday and we don't take our laptops with us and all this type of stuff. Like, none of that is really real, to be honest with you. You know, it's not real from an entrepreneur point of view, especially in the early days when you're just getting started. All right. Okay, right. I've been talking now for quite some time. I'm going to leave it there. Remember, this is what's required. You want to be an entrepreneur. Look, the rewards are there to be seen. You know, yes, you can have a much better lifestyle. You travel the world, you know. Obviously, those of you that might follow me on Instagram, you follow me on Facebook, whatever it may well be, you will get a bit of an idea on what my lifestyle will look like, okay? You know, I'm not trying to say, look at me, because no one gives a damn. You know, at the end of the day, I've learned this and I've worked hard for this. I have, you know, because this is what I really wanted. You know, you can have it too. You can have whatever you want, but you've got to be prepared to upskill and really understand what's really required to be that person. All right? Okay. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll do another video again very, very, very soon. Until the next time, thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.